I'm your host, Drew Clancy, and today I am grateful to be joined by Adam Faitek, who recently took on the executive director role at Pinky Swear Foundation, an organization with a powerful origin story. Mitch, a young boy with cancer, made a pinky swear promise with his father to help other kids battling cancer. Since 2003, Pinky Swear has made it its mission to fulfill that promise, helping families during the cancer journey. Under Adam's leadership, the foundation's work continues to be saying yes to every family, guided by compassion, collaboration, and inclusion. Let's jump right in with Adam. Well, Adam, it is a great pleasure to have you on Fundraising Leaders with Drew. Really appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit of wisdom and your background in fundraising. In fact, let's start back with the decision to become a fundraiser. What was it? What were kind of the circumstances that kind of brought you into this field?
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this before, Drew, but I don't think there were many of us that said I want to be a fundraiser when I grow up, right? And so now I think you have more programs that are dedicated to the field, which I think is great because I think there is certainly a science to how to be effective in the work. But I kind of fell into it. I spent my early career in corporate finance, and after doing that for a couple of years, was really looking for something that was more mission driven and kind of did a graduate program to help me transition into what ended up being the nonprofit space. And then, I graduated in 2010. So I was looking for a job. It was not a great market, looking for a role as a volunteer manager. And ultimately, as I was doing that work and I was engaging with people, I don't even remember when or how, but it just became clear that you had all these folks who were really passionate about their work and they're giving all this time. Why aren't we asking them to make a financial contribution as well? And it really kind of spurred out of that and kind of going to our executive director there and just saying, hey, I think there's an opportunity here. And one of the advantages of working for a small organization then was, you can take chances or do things. And I got that opportunity. And so it really kind of built off this idea of, community engagement and bringing people together. And in retrospect, right, now it's clear that's totally an iteration around how fundraising works. But that's just kind of how it happened. I fell into it and then started doing more and more of it as I just really enjoyed the relationship piece of it.
Sure. Um, Early in your career, you worked at the intersection really of basic needs, food security, financial stability, affordable housing. Um, how did these experiences shape your philosophy around fundraising? And yeah, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm certainly coming from and spending most of my career really in social services. I'm probably a little biased in terms of where I think, a community's and an individual's dollars should go. But I have really seen the power of philanthropy and community-based organizations stepping in where sometimes, government is not, or even if they are, maybe because the need is so large. I mean, really in this sector, we're in the business of reducing suffering or stopping suffering and creating opportunity. And I don't think,
Sure.
whether it's a food bank, a housing organization, organization like Pinky Swear that provides, a direct financial assistance to families going through cancer, um, you know, both from a heart perspective, but also a head. I don't think there's really a better, bang for your buck as a donor in terms of wanting to make a difference, help your community, um, and to
Sure.
investing in organizations that are on the ground supporting our community. I do think, kind of like from a big picture standpoint, there's something really important and powerful about a community coming together and saying, we see a need and we want to help solve it. I think that actually binds us closer together. I think, we live in kind of a world these days that's a little, it's very fractured, right? And I think organizations, community-based organizations, can still serve almost a glue, and not just helping people who are marginalized, but really all members of society, seeing and understanding the idea of what happens when, we all do better, when we all do better, right? So that's kind of
Sure.
what it is for me, and it's kind of, maybe it's just been inherent, but I've been in it, and so I'm in it now. I'm probably not going to leave the sector.
Sure. Sure. One of the areas I'm interested in with fundraising is the role of storytelling, um, capturing donor stories, as well as telling the story of the nonprofit. Do you have any thoughts around that? The role of storytelling in raising money?
Yeah, and I have a finance background, and I can be very analytical, and I think for folks like me, sometimes you can tend to talk about ROI or these other things in terms of making your case. But Drew, to your point, people really, they really, really give with their heart, right? Like when they have an emotional
Sure.
connection to the work. Obviously, you need to appeal to both, but that piece is really matters. And one of the last organizations I was at, we had a major donor that we had worked with, and he was very analytical and financial driven. And, ultimately, I think what motivated him, though, to make those, so the financial piece was important because it helped him understand that, yeah, this is a good organization to invest in. But ultimately, what I think actually got him to take a step to make an incredible investment in our work was he had a personal relationship tutoring one of the folks, one of our residents at Common Bond. And, he did this over many years. And it was really that relationship that, he has remembered and will remember for the rest of his life. And I think is part of the reason he, wants to give to us. The second piece of this, right, when you're doing this, so is, I think, an act of trust. And I think when you work with people, I think of fundraising in some respects as a trust building exercise. It's really important that organizations and the people in the organizations kind of do what they say they're going to do. And every time you do that, I think it builds a confidence from the donors end to say, okay, I'm seeing that they're actually taking my dollar and really helping make a difference. So that gives me confidence to do more of that.
Here, 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 here. You're now stepping into a role as executive director at Pinky Swear Foundation, which has a very personal and emotional origin story, a child's promise to help others. What's it like to take the reins of this organization that's built on such a powerful legacy? And what responsibility do you feel as the executive director to kind of honor that promise?
Yeah, I mean, so I am incredibly honored, and I feel really humbled to have the opportunity to step into this organization and help, build off this legacy. As um, with Pinky Swear Foundation, it was really founded by Mitch, who as a kid was going through terminal cancer, and as a incredible act of generosity, and frankly a lesson for all of us, gave away all his savings to other families who, were kids going through cancer, and dealing with financial distress. And right, he made his parents his dad pinky swear, promise that they'll continue this work after he was gone. And they have done that. And so when you ask me the responsibility, I mean, I feel an incredible responsibility that in some respects, while I didn't get an opportunity to meet Mitch, that every day when I go into work and we are looking to help families who, are going through really one of the worst experiences of their lives, that we need to be there for them. And so it's a little daunting if you think about that, but I am really excited about what we're doing and how we're helping families. And every day I think about how I can build off of the legacy that Mitch left.
Sure, 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 sure. So powerful. Um, you mentioned this started very personal story, a local organization. Um, how do you see scaling up, uh, this story? And really, is the vision to turn this into a national player?
Yeah, so our vision at Pinky Swear is to say yes to every family. And we, that number, we do have a number. We think it's about it's about, I think, 15,000 people, because it's about 15,000 families per year that unfortunately in this country go through this cancer diagnosis with their kids. We serve close to about 3,000. So our goal is to kind of fully meet that need. And we have a long way to go, unfortunately. But
Sure,
I will say this is really the first organization where I truly believe in my heart we can get there. I think since we're already national in scale, one of the things that we're trying to figure out is, we're providing support across the country. We probably need to figure out our model to make sure that, we are connecting with donors across the country. Being based in Minneapolis, I think we've done an incredible job fundraising in Minneapolis and a couple other places across the United States. But really, I think for us, number one, it's like connecting with those other folks who found our mission or have been helped by our mission across the country. And then number two is we have to kind of, I think, really understand what are those core fundraising activities that are replicable, at a larger
sure.
scale. So that's something we're kind of figuring out. With our board, we're actually going through a strategic planning process next year to kind of start to map this out. But the exciting thing walking into this organization is, I think, from Steve and Becky, the founders, up through our board, there's a dedication to saying yes to every family. And so, to me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and that's kind of the work we're starting on.
So great. So great. Talk a little bit about maybe some of the specifics of the
Yeah.
strategies. And again, you're relatively new in this position. I understand that, but what's your perspective right now? How do you see kind of taking this to the next level?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple ways. I mean, the first is, and this is not going to come as a surprise to you or any other fundraisers out there, is, I think, you know, we've still our like major gifts program, for example, I think is still relatively new in terms of like structure and strategy and like execution. And so I think, that's certainly going to be a focus of mine and our team, is really building out that model. And there's opportunity there. I mean, we have a big enough base of support already where, we there's generosity in there to help us kind of move the mission forward. So that, Drew, is probably going to be the biggest focus. And then, you know, what's interesting is we're testing different strategies to bring and invite more donors at kind of that base level, that level of support to the organization. So historically, the organization had done we were very event driven, and we're doing much more kind of mail acquisition. We're doing some interesting things on the digital marketing side, where we think our acquisition costs are actually going to be pretty efficient, and that is ultimately where we're at. Is we're testing different strategies. It's likely going to be somewhere in there where we're going to, probably start making more larger investments, to start to kind of broaden that pool, of which we can, write it from the bottom of the pyramid to the top. We can grow it. So I would say it's that digital
Sure.
fundraising, it's the mail acquisition, and then it's the major gifts that I think is going to likely be the focus.
Talk about, do you see those as sort of separate initiatives, or specifically around major gift? Is the idea to identify a donor, maybe through a digital channel or through direct mail, and is the strategy to potentially kind of move them up into your, putting them into portfolio, or however you all think about that?
Yeah, so we really have to build out our we have to kind of and our team has already been doing a great job with this, but internally we are discussing like how do we like really fully kind of what I would almost call our theory of fundraising, right? Like how do we kind of say this is the most efficient way for us to bring attract a donor to the organization. Then once, maybe the marketing team has attracted them, they have signed up for an email, maybe they had made a first gift, you know, how are we kind of identifying them as a potential donor at a mid-level or major level? Fortunately, right now we already have kind of resources in those positions. So we have to probably strengthen that process. We're probably going to have to make more investments, as we hopefully are able to start growing more than we already have,
Sure.
that there are going to be places and people for those donors to go and start communicating with. But yeah, I mean, that is the goal, is that I think we kind of start to build that structure. Again, I would say right now, there's some folks that we should really be connecting with that already are supporters of ours that we haven't. So it's not like, we have talked to everyone who's in there, but I think we have to do both. Like we have to, on the major gift side, we have to focus on these people who could be helping us move ahead to the future now, while starting to bring in those grassroots donors who can be the, next major donor in, 2 to 5 years, right?
Sure. 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 Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, major gift obviously is a key strategy for, you know, all nonprofits, or most nonprofits, certainly. Talk a little bit about how you see major gift, how you approach this, both from sort of an analytics standpoint. You mentioned that's sort of an interest or strength of yours, um, right up through, preparing for the conversation and how you see that and how you prepare for that.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump into that. I want to just add one other thing kind of related to all this work, right? That I think we're trying to figure out is, with any donor at any level, our work and ambitions are kind of on a national scale. But again, as I'm sure one of the reasons people give to organizations like Pinky Swear is they want to help support their local community. So I think
Right.
as we do this work, and then especially on the donor side, how do we talk to donors about the work? How do we get their buy-in for this larger vision? Um, Honoring that certain major donors, when you try to raise a principal level gift, oftentimes they're gonna have specifications for how that gift wants to be used. How does that fit within what we're trying to do? We have been able to raise some pretty large gifts, and those gifts have been really impactful. They've also had, some restrictions on them. So I think that is one of the factors that we have to think about. But going back to your original question, you know, with um, with kind of the process and how I think about,
Yeah.
it's really, I'm spending a lot of my first months at the organization getting to know our board, getting to know our donor base, getting to know those key stakeholders, and we're doing some analysis to kind of build out what my portfolio would look like, which is, probably a combination of folks who are already supporting our work very generously, and then those that potentially could, that we think they have interest in. And
Sure.
that is a combination of, I think, data analysis, research, and right, what do our great fundraising team already know about those folks and their interests and the connections to us. So it's really kind of like we're starting at this point with like building the potential list of donor prospects. We already have some of those, and then it's like having the structure in place, to kind of work through that list. One of the things that actually, at the encouragement of one of our big supporters at my last role, was, he had a sales background and really helped build a really strong kind of prospect pipeline report that we would use monthly, right? So it's going to be some of those systems that we'll build in, and then it's the individual donor strategies that are matched, right, to donor interest, and passion. So that's going to be how we do it. Again, we have a great team at Pinky Swear, so some of that work has already been happening, and I'm coming in to help kind of build off of that and add some capacity.
Sure, 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 sure. Um, in your prior uh, prior organizations, um, would maybe share some stories again about uh, major gift and how you see that, maybe how you prepare for those conversations with potential donors, what you're thinking about, what your approach is. Yeah, give us a little bit of the context.
Yeah, I once went through a major gift training with a fundraiser. I unfortunately can't remember his name now, but he worked for the National Boys and Girls Club, and there's that old Allen Iverson quote. We're talking about practice. Well, in major gifts fundraising, right? Like we really are talking about practice, and I think one of the things that I think I really believe in is like this. You are very preparation is really the key to success. And so when you when we go to, even before we have a conversation, right, we're thinking about um this individual or this institutional or this company. What do they what do we know about them? Who are they connected to? What are their interests? What have they given to in the past? um you know
Sure.
why do they support us? Is it from a mission standpoint or a connection standpoint? And then kind of really building these donor cultivation plans based off of it. But it's funny. um, People are people, right? And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to wanting to adapt your approach to the type of person. And I had a donor at, I'll just say, a previous organization who I think was probably given about $2,500 a year. Um, I had asked when I joined, I'm like, hey, what's going on with this person? Oh, they don't want to be contacted. Leave them alone. Okay, I want to hear that from them, right? So I had reached out. Yeah, okay, I'll grab coffee with you, but don't spend time on me. Don't spend time on me. And we really got to understand, this person really cared about some of the work we were doing around homelessness prevention. And, we built a relationship over about 3 or 4 years that started with, hey, would you, that $2,500 became, 15,000 over, and then that 15,000, we showed the impact of that program. And again, kind of leave me alone. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Like, don't want a lot of communication. And she was very direct. So it was hard to get a meeting. And, we did a tour with her. And I just said, I said, look, like, we're doing this campaign. I think you're going to care about this campaign. I'd like for you to consider this. She kind of looked at me. Can I send you something? Yes. Emailed her. And then, I had like a 1 sentence response that said, yes, I'll do it. It checks in the mail. Right. So it's just, it's $250,000. And so, everyone is a little different. And so I think it is really about building that strategy out to folks who, depending on kind of the situation. Right. So that was kind of how that was unique.
Sure, that's a powerful story. Um, going back, Adam, to something you're talking about before with uh, oftentimes donors, they have specific ideas around how they would like the money used or which circumstances. Or um, uh, do you have a story perhaps to share, or maybe it's a philosophy, or any thoughts on that? It's a common challenge, obviously, or can be.
Yeah. And so at Common Bond, I think we had built a real reputation and a real strength with our donor base. So by the time we had kind of gone into this most recent campaign, we had built this comprehensive campaign with some broad goals. And honestly, our experience was generally that people were willing to were willing to kind of support those broad goals. We had to get, I think, creative in a couple instances. We had a financial partner who um, who who essentially their giving capacity was relatively small, at least through their formal foundation. And so we worked with them on a program it's a state specific program in Minnesota where they can get about 85% of their contribution back towards their state tax liability. So it's a huge leverage point, right? And for
Sure.
this financial institution, they also got CRA credit. So we were getting about $10,000 a year from them, you know, and in that case, we had to kind of create this specific request that was specific to helping support housing communities in certain areas that aligned with their Community Reinvestment Act needs. We had to find very specific properties, and have many conversations with their tax people, which is not, sometimes you do that, but not all the time. But ultimately, long story short, we got them to give $3 million to this program. So it was a much
Wow.
bigger gift. So, I mean, is again, I feel like I'm probably saying what and a lot of leaders know, which is like there's sometimes a bit of a tension point in finding opportunities that can be win-win that can really help benefit the organization and also drive the mission forward. And, as a fundraiser and as a leader, you always have to be careful with mission creep and the concern about, well,
Sure.
we want to bring in this gift, but is it going to help us advance the work we're doing? And, so those are kind of a constant battle. And part of going back to this question about trust with donors, I think part of being trusting with donors is being honest with them. So if we're saying to them, you want your gift to go this way and we can't use it, instead of us like bending over backwards because we just want to get the large gift, we just need to
Sure.
tell them, okay, that isn't something we can do, or we can do this, but we can't do, we can only go so far with that. And my experience is like, most of the time donors appreciate that honesty and feedback. And, there are just times where maybe it isn't the right fit. And, you know, I think you have to understand there's other folks out there who can support you. So that's just, I think, you have to be comfortable with that. Of course, your leadership has to be comfortable sometimes saying no to a gift, which isn't always the case.
Sure. 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 Um, you mentioned earlier the never say no to families at Pinky Swear. Um, you know, share a little bit about how do you plan and innovate to make such an ambitious promise sustainable.
We have a lot of supporters who have a personal connection to childhood cancer. They went through it, their kids went through it, maybe a family member or friend went through it, and um, that's kind of what brings them to the mission. And being in this line of work, and again having a past experience as a volunteer manager, um, one of the things that I understand is that you got to find ways for people to engage in the work. It has to go above and beyond just asking somebody for money, but you know, basically, if you can engage people, you can often bring them in closer, and that closer connection often means they would consider or they will on their own give more, right? And so,
Sure.
we're already doing some interesting things in the space to think about how to engage people. By the way, right, we can't, donors can't go visit a child in the hospital, right? There are HIPAA laws, there are other things that that as a mission, there are other organizations or people and get closer to the mission, right? If you're reporting an
Right.
animal shelter, you can literally go visit the dog that you might help. And so we have to get really creative in figuring out how to connect people to the mission. So one of the things our team has done that I think has been really helpful as a way to get people involved, and as a way that's scalable for us, is we do these what are called letters of encouragement, and people can do them in groups. They can come into our office. They can do it remotely and mail them to us. But essentially, they make their own cards. They can color them, and they're literally making these cards to encourage and support and love on the kids and their families who are going through cancer. And so those are the types of things that frankly are really powerful. Our families love them. They're hugely beneficial. It often is a first step for people to get involved in. And so when we talk about strategy and innovation, like that is social services work is hard, and it can be a little messy. And I think that is what we need to figure out how to do more of the pinky swear. We need to figure out how to, whether it's letters of encouragement or other episodic type of volunteer opportunities, that's where we have to go. That is the path when people say, okay, I feel combined to this. Some really interesting partnerships are also likely kind of our path forward. So we've had a long partnership that has now just gotten relaunched with Love Your Melon, which is the company that you buy these really kind of cute beanies, and then they donate to somebody facing cancer, and then they donate a part of their proceeds to Pinky Swear. So some of these types of partnerships are where we're going and looking to expand on, and where we need to go if we want to get to where we want to be.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Taking a step back and looking at maybe the broader landscape, donor engagement is shifting. Fewer donors, but larger gifts. But there are also new opportunities in peer-to-peer digital platforms, cause marketing. What trends do you see that you're excited about? And again, you're kind of talking about innovation and new ideas potentially at Pinky Swear. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, you're right, right? Like the number of families giving to a or individual or households giving to a nonprofit organization, pre Great Recession, it was like 65 or 66%. Now I believe it's under 50%. I mean, so we've seen a huge drop off in the number of people participating at that level. So in response, right, one of the things we are doing, many organizations are doing, is you do need to make sure you have a really strong major gift program to help support that work, and that our board understands that, and some of our key supporters understand the role that they're playing. But that being said, one of the things that I think is part of this discussion a little bit, but maybe is being missed, right, is you have people, maybe because there's an increasing distrust in institutions about where my dollar's going. Am I really helping someone? They're GoFundMe, right? Like you have a lot more people just going direct to the source, right? Like, my neighbor got hurt maybe 20 years ago. I was, going through an organization to get support. Now my family member might just be doing a GoFundMe to help raise the funds that I need. And so, you know, organizations like Pinky Swear and other organizations, they need to build trust and continue to build trust with donors. That is a multi-year project that we're not going to solve tomorrow. We, in some respects, are in a unique position in that we are providing direct assistance. We have relationships with the families going through these circumstances, and we are transparent in how much money is going to assistance. What is that proportion of our program spend? So I think it is part of kind of addressing this is building really transparent, really clear areas of impact for our communities that we work in, so they believe like I'm helping someone and I can see how this is being helped. So that's kind of what again, we're in a unique situation where we're already doing that. We're going to be leaning more into that. But I think that's the work that has to be done by every organization, right?
You touched on earlier in your career working with volunteers. Volunteer engagement seems to be a consistent part of your leadership. What have you learned about transforming volunteers into lifelong advocates, supporters?
What have I learned? Well, volunteerism, being a volunteer manager sometimes can be like herding cats, right? And I joke about
Literally.
that, but it is the beauty and the challenge and why this is a really important field for our sector is because it can take time and effort and investment to really be able to use the skills, times, and talents of people. But
Right.
what I have found is when you can figure out how to do that effectively, people want to help more. And people at the end of the day, most of the people they're good hearted, they mean well. And so in some respects, it's incumbent upon the organizations to invest in the infrastructure to provide those opportunities and make sure there's strong opportunities. There's been a number of times where I have seen either in my own organization, somebody doesn't feel engaged. They're not waiting for you to re-engage them. They are moving on. And so,
Right.
you have to be proactive and in our engagement. And I don't know if everyone understands this, but that takes infrastructure. That takes, hiring
Oh,
a volunteer manager or hiring a volunteer team. That takes building partnerships with companies that can take, a couple of years sometimes for the financial benefits really to pay off. But one of the things that Common Bond that we started doing, and I hope that they'll be doing more of, is that we built partnerships with local companies to provide on-site support for our housing community. So some of it was we're going to help clean up in the fall and then plant new plants and beautify, your home. We're going to do some direct connection. We're going to have a barbecue over the 4th for veterans. We're going to go visit seniors over the holidays. And we had a local partner who's giving, I think their first gift was under 10,000. Now they're giving $200,000 a year. And that was, probably over about 10 years. But like, right, that is the time and investment needed. And I don't think organizations, unfortunately, I think if you need to cut back, or we always have needs, we always don't have enough funding, that can be an area where sometimes we pull back from or don't invest in. So I'm being a little preachy here. Obviously, I'm a former volunteer manager, so I really believe in the power of using volunteers and organizations. Last thing I'll say on this is there's been studies, done about organizations that use volunteers effectively. They're way more efficient at carrying out your mission. So if there are any donors listening to this podcast, I would say find organizations that really strongly utilize volunteers because they're going to be the best use of your dollar.
love it. Love it. Two more questions. One kind of thinking about sort of your legacy or mission, Adam. Looking across your career from food security to housing and now supporting families battling cancer. Is there a common thread, perhaps, that sort of ties this all together? When you think about your legacy, what do you hope to impact in the difference you hope to make here in terms of nonprofit fundraising and engagement?
Yeah. So I think earlier in my career, my focus was really about, and how I probably thought about this work was really about how are we creating a just society? How are we helping people? How are we supporting people? How are we reducing cruelty? How are we increasing opportunity? Those are things that I think are still really important and a part of my work. But I just have to say, for me personally in my work, and just seeing kind of where we are as a country, where we have a lot of division. Unfortunately, I think we have a lot of anger and some hate. And part of my personal hope is that I am helping contribute to bringing people together, that I'm helping to bring strengthening communities, that I'm helping bridge divides, so that it isn't just about who is the person who's the recipient of our services, but that as a community, we understand that when we come together, we can do more together than any of us can do individually. And so that's what I hope. I'm one small person, but I hope that in addition to those individuals that need our services as nonprofit providers, that we can stand as a beacon for society.
Oh, love that. And last question. Um, for those new to the field, new to fundraising, looking back at your career to this point, what lessons or what advice might you give, or things to avoid, things to pursue, to again, new people entering the field?
Yeah, so you're my I'm just going to tell you, Drew, my standard operating procedure is to be on the other end of this, where I'm a very inquisitive person. I like to ask questions, probably not answer them as much. And so, the two things I would tell people who are new to the field is like be curious, like ask questions, come in with kind of a learning mindset. Don't be afraid of trying things, but really seeking to understand, I think, is really critical. Honestly, the way I've learned so much in my career, I literally had a coffee this morning with somebody that one of my board members introduced me to, that as I'm trying to think about how to scale up our work, hey, here's somebody else who's done it. Like, great. I'd love to talk to them and learn from them. So I think the curiosity piece is really important. And then, a personal adage of mine and just my own leadership is really this. It's simple. It's do what you say you're going to do. So, show up to work every day with a commitment to the folks that you're working with, that you're going to follow through, that you're going to do the thing that you say you're going to do. I think those acts, even if you apply it to fundraising, like I would say just doing the work right is probably one of the most important ways to be successful. And sometimes that can be
Sure.
scary or hard to pick up a phone, to send an email, to meet with someone you don't know, to invite them in your mission, to ask them for money. But that follow through and that just doing the work, I think, is what separates the folks who I think end up being successful from those that struggle a little bit.
Right on. Right on. Well, thank you, Adam. This has been terrific. Lots of great wisdom and knowledge shared. Appreciate you very much, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Drew. I really appreciate it.